So it's almost the middle of May now, 2019. I actually have not really started on my goal of catching a 25-pound or better striper on a fly rod. If you don't know the backstory to this video, you should go back and read the blog. The basics are I've been fly fishing for years now. I've caught hundreds and hundreds of fish on my fly rod, striped bass in the surf, but not a really big one. And so this year I'm going to really buckle down. And as part of that, up to this point, I've been fishing relatively easy areas to access. A lot of little outflows and sandy beaches and that sort of thing. And it's worked great. I've caught tons of fish, but nothing really big. And so the impetus for this video actually just came the other night. There's a spot that I fish a fair amount. It's put up quite a few 30-pounders now. I've broken off quite a few fish. And I was standing there last night, and it was pretty calm. And I started thinking about, this is a perfect spot for me to try to accomplish my goal. So I talked about this last time, I think, on my post where I said, it's not fly fishing, it's not plug fishing, it's all just surf fishing. And I need to really view it that way. So I looked at the spot and I said, well, I know there's big fish here, and I know I'm going to be potentially even more productive this year, every year learning more. And I said, how can I take advantage of this spot? So a lot of current at the spot, big current, deep water, and it's a little bit sketchy. It's a little bit scary. I really only fish it in my wetsuit. I have been fishing it in my waders the last few nights, but I don't fish it the same way. And honestly, if I got into a really big fish, something over 30 pounds, probably not going to land it. But I know this time of year that's not really going to happen necessarily, although I hope it does. So like this week, for example, I fished it a few nights, and the biggest fish I had was maybe in the high 20 inches, maybe 30. I didn't get a measurement on it. And that was on my plugging rod. So I was standing there the other night, literally the other night, and I was looking at the rocks in front of me. And they're in the current. But, if you get out there early, there's not a ton of current, and then the worst thing you have to do is you just have to wait until the current really drops, the tide really drops, before you can come back in. Or the alternative is I'm going to potentially have to drift with the current just a little bit so I can swim and get out of it. I want to say right now, I'm not advocating you do anything dangerous. In fact, I'm going to let you in on something that I don't really like to talk about, and that's that I'm kind of a wuss. I know there's lots of guys, Long Island, the guys that were at the forefront of skishing and wetsuiting, who they'll go out and they'll swim super long distances. I am an excellent swimmer. I raced triathlon competitively for a long time. I don't really like swimming in the ocean at night. And there's a tournament I do in June in Surf Rats Ball with Bill Wetzel, and you can't swim. So in the month of June, if I'm going to partake in that, I really don't try to swim. So anyways, my whole point of saying this is that I talk a really big game, but I don't do a ton of swimming. It's a lot of deep wading. Maybe the water gets up to here, but I'm not actually swimming. Most of the time, my feet are close to the bottom. And the wetsuit is used as more a safety thing if I get knocked off in the rough water or whatever. But I've decided that it's time for me to really up my game. I don't care what anybody says. If you are fly fishing, casting distance is an issue. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care. It's an issue. I can stand in my yard and cast my 100-foot fly line off of my reel every day, all day long with a 2.0 Clouser. But you put me in the surf with the wind, with the waves, etc., and after 2 hours of false casting, I'm casting 60 feet. Maybe even 45 feet. Especially if I'm trying to cast big flat wings or something like that. So I need to get out, is what I'm saying. So there's a rock in front of me that I'm going to go onto this year. I've decided. I've talked it over even with my wife. I'm not so sure she's thrilled with it, and it's going to take a little bit of bravery and a little bit of just accepting that if I get a big fish and I have to come back in to take a photo, I might have to drift. But as part of that too, I've decided that I really need to change up my gear. And I've been thinking about this before anyway, so this is just maybe a good impetus to do it. Normally, I carry a sling pack. This is an Orvis sling pack that I really like. I've had it for years. Great pack, goes on my back, It's got a bunch of stuff in it. And then, you know, I have my stripping basket, which you can see here. And I fill it with, you know, fly holders like this. I mean, the great thing about flies is you can cram a bunch of them in small spaces, but I usually carry stuff like this. This year, I don't want to have anything on my back, and I don't want to have anything in my hands when I'm trying to access that spot, especially when I'm trying to leave the spot or if I have a fish. So I'm just going to show you, and I'm giving you a lot of information in this video, but the thing I'm going to show you is my setup that I'm going to use this year for fly rodding. So this is my surf belt. It's what I use for my plug bag, but I've modified it today to show you just this is all I'm going to carry when I go on the fly rod. So I'm going to go through it quickly. The first thing is this Mac pouch, a multi-use pouch. Oh, everything's still wet from last night still. And in this is all the flies I'm going to carry. I'm really going to limit myself to just, you know, big flies in baggies, which is kind of a pain, but it's really the only good way to do it and keep it in this small of a package. So let me show you. These are some flat wings that I've tied. So you can see this is a pretty big fly, and that's a pretty big bodied fly. But they fit fine in these little baggies. And again, the great thing is you can cram a bunch in. So if you think about plugs, what you might carry at most 3, maybe 4 of a particular plug, and then they're usually different colors. So this is 2 flies of the same color in the same size. And then the other thing I did is I modified this little box. I dremeled out the inside of it so that I can fit more flies. And these are more, I mean, they're pretty large, but they're more like moderately sized. So here's a 3.0 Li fly. And here's like a peanut bunker with a floating head on it. And those are moderate sized flies. You know, for like the hollow flies, it's going to be sort of, again, just putting them in a baggie and shoving them in this little pouch. So that creates very little drag. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I always carry a knife. I always carry a knife. You get in a situation where you get wrapped up in line, something gets tangled. I always want to carry a knife. I consider it I'm sort of superstitious about it now. I've never had to use it. I actually pulled it on a junkie who was threatening to kill me once, which is a story in Surfcaster's Journal a couple months ago, maybe 6 months ago now. So maybe you can check that out. But I carry a big knife, stainless steel dive knife, almost as a, you know, hope I never use it sort of thing. The next thing on my pouch, which is again soaking wet, is a little camera pouch for the Logic case. And I have my Olympus TG Tough camera in here, the indestructible camera. This is all epoxy back together. It's been underwater hours and hours and hours and hours, probably hundreds of hours at this point, and it still keeps going. This is if I catch, you know, a moderately sized fish and I don't want to swim back to shore. If I catch a 15-pounder or something, I want to get a good picture, I just take it with this. But if I get something good, I'm going back to shore. And then finally, I've really debated this. So, and of course, everything's leashed. So this the camera itself is leashed. The pouch is on the belt, but the camera itself is actually leashed. Then I have my leader spool, which is just attached, which I rubber banded in my wrist spool. I got 30 on here. I use 30 or 50. Just depends on what I'm doing. I grabbed 30 just for the example. And then the last thing I've really debated is the boga. It's really heavy. It's probably as heavy as everything else combined on my bag. Oh, it's not the last thing, but I'll get to the last thing. And I think for now I'm going to try it. Again, I'm in my wetsuit, very buoyant, and you float, and I'm a strong swimmer, so I don't think this is going to be too much of a problem. I mean, I swim with my plug bag on, but again, not to the kind of current and kind of situation that I'm going to try and get on with my fly rod. So, but this is essential. First of all, if I want to weigh a fish that I think might be big enough to go back to shore and get good photos of for this challenge, I want to know. I need to know. And the second thing is, you know, being on the rock with the fly rod, with only 30-pound test, and I've snapped so many rods, I want something I can control the fish with. I could use fish grips, the plastic fish grips. They're very light, and that'll be the alternative to this. So if I don't like this, if I still feel like this is weighing me down too much and it's not necessarily, I'll go with the fish grips instead. So then the last thing is my beloved T-Rain sheath, which has a spring inside. These things are indestructible. This is the second one I've owned in 6 years. I don't ever rinse them. The thing that failed on the last one is this mechanism. The thing completely pulled out because I kept like grabbing stuff and like ripping this really hard. So, and then just my cheap pen pliers. So T-Rain sheath is awesome, by the way. This is probably also not necessary. I could use some forceps like I have on my bag here. You know, this is really all you need. So that's another area where I could lose some weight from my bag. But I think this is what I'm going to use. I weighed it. It's about 7 pounds, 8 pounds. So it's not too bad. I don't think that's going to weigh me down too much. And again, I've swam with my plug bag on, a million times. And, hey, little lightning bug. I swam with my plug bag on a million times, and it's never really been an issue. Only a few times in Cuttyhonk I really felt like I was getting myself into trouble. But this is going to be different. This is a good swim with good current. And, the current is really the thing. It's not even the distance. So that's my thoughts on what I'm going to use for my bag, and just another thing to think about with the fly rodding for the big fish. I got to put myself into situations where they are. And to do that, essentially, I've really got to man up. I love to be in the water, and I do like to swim. I just don't really like to swim in significant current that could wash me out into the ocean. But that's what I'm going to try. Worst case, I'm going to go for a nice long swim with the current until I can get back out of it. Again, not advocating anything. This is my own choice, and I've thought about it a lot. Please be careful when you get out there and you do this yourself.